welcome to the call Dr. Barney Margolis and maybe just address what your main concerns regarding the problem of EMF and children and teenagers specifically are.
Well, thank you, Linda. I'm really delighted to be here. Obviously the first thing is to determine whether or not there is a problem with EMFs and children. And I don't think there's any question with all the research that's been done, particularly in Europe, with a little bit of research that's been done here, that there's no question that EMFs are a major problem. The second aspect, as far as children are concerned, is the fact that the children are being exposed to EMFs in many different ways, obviously through the use of computers and television sets, but now even more so with the advent of the cell phone and the fact that the advertising, the companies that are manufacturing cell phones are advertising now to children all the way down to the ages of 7 and 8 years old. Not only that, but if you've seen the commercials, you'll see a child using a cell phone, watching the minutes up to 1,200 minutes, 1,300 minutes, 1,500 minutes a month rolling by, and talking about how wonderful that is to give these children the access. To me, that is really going to be a major factor in affecting their health in the future.
Now, when you talk about their health in the future, what really are the health implications? As you see them, what are the risks that they're exposing themselves to?
Well, as I said, we know that EMFs are dangerous. We know from the laboratory studies that EMFs affect many different aspects of health. For example, they break down DNA. Not only do they break down DNA, but they also interfere with the body's ability to repair DNA. DNA is being broken down all the time, but it interferes with the body's ability to repair DNA. And when you have cells with abnormal DNA, you have cells who have the potential of developing into cancer cells. Not only that, but if, for example, a sperm cell or an ovarian cell, an ova, becomes affected where the DNA is damaged, this has significant implications for the next generation, because those sexual cells are going to then carry and produce an offspring that's going to have the problems with DNA already inherent in it, and that's really scary. We know about the relationship between the EMFs and brain tumors, particularly acoustic neuromas and also glioblastomas, both malignant and benign tumors. We know about the problem of the leakage of proteins through the blood-brain barrier, the breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, so that toxins and other abnormal material can leak into the brain, causing brain damage, plus the effect of the radiation itself on a child's brain, which is developing. The brains are growing and developing, and when you have immature cells which are in a process of developing, they're much more sensitive to adverse effects.
So we're really talking about some significant health implications. I know that oftentimes as we talk about EMF as a source of environmental stress, that we can feel it on a daily basis, whether it's fatigue or anxiety. But really what you're talking about are significant health implications that really give us cause for concern over the long haul with these children. You know, I've heard you talk this morning. We had a great conversation, and you were talking about the parallels of electromagnetic frequency and the problems associated, for example, with tobacco, and the parallels in these two different industries. Maybe you could share your thoughts on this.
Well, there are several similarities, and then there are several very, very, very definite differences between them. The similarities are that we're dealing with basically a toxin associated with the body, and not only that, but it's a toxin which affects the body not immediately, but over the long term. And the accumulation, it's the buildup, it's the accumulation of the exposure over years, which eventually produces the emphysema and the lung cancer and the heart disease that is associated with tobacco smoking. Very much like the EMFs are, the effects of EMFs are cumulative, and so we don't see them right away. We'll see them 10 years, 15 years down the road. The differences are really major, however. For example, you can see somebody smoking. You don't have to smoke. you can tell that a person is smoking from the fact that their clothing smells or their hair smells or whatever. But and you can stop people from smoking. And as a matter of fact, it's illegal in most places for children to buy cigarettes. But electromagnetic radiation is pervasive throughout the society. We're living now in the wireless age. There is no escaping from the electromagnetic smog that surrounds us. It's insidious, it's silent, it's odorless, tasteless, and the other problem, of course, is the social factor that everybody is pretty much hooked onto the appliances that emit electromagnetic radiation, cell phones, television sets, computers, and there's no way that we're going to stop people from using these. So it's a much more dangerous kind of a situation than tobacco.
Well, you know, one of the things that I find very interesting as you talk about the parallels with tobacco as another environmental stress, you know, I've always recognized that different people have different susceptibility levels, whether to stress or toxins. For example, in the arena of tobacco, we know some people could smoke their whole life and not develop any kind of lung cancer, yet someone else with minimal exposure to tobacco or secondhand smoke, they're triggered, that cancer, with very minimal exposure. And I think the same is true with EMF and electromagnetic frequencies. You know, we all have different levels of susceptibility, and as individuals, how do we know when we're on that overload?
Well, right now we have no way of being able to measure a person's susceptibility to developing cancer or developing other problems, either from tobacco or from EMFs. However, we do know that the body has certain defense mechanisms available to us. Now, of course, there may be genetic factors, which we can tell from a family history. But beyond that, we have to rely on what has been inherent in our body's defense mechanism, and that's our immune system. And in many cases, individuals who are developing these adverse situations are those who have had one way or another a major effect on their immune system for whatever reason, the use of toxins or pollutants or whatever. And so the important things that we can do is to strengthen our immune system, and we can do that in many different ways. Obviously, from a nutritional standpoint, the use of antioxidants, which are very powerful to help to support the immune system and to prevent damage from free radicals. And also, of course, we can't forget about our biofield, which a lot of people don't even understand, but which we know is really our first line of defense against all sorts of external irritants and toxins. So strengthening our biofield, strengthening our immune system is a major factor in helping to allay at least or reduce the likelihood of developing any major adverse effects from these toxins.
You know, when we talk about what can be done, you as a pediatrician, and I know you're retired now, but still have such a huge influence with your credibility and the background that you've done. Dr. Margolis, what can we do as individuals, as you know, mothers and fathers and parents and concerned citizens? How do you see what we can do every single day?
Well, obviously, parents, the major role for parents is to serve as role models for their children. And so, you know, obviously education is going to be a major factor. And the education is going to have to start with the parents, letting them understand what these dangers are, and then have them transfer that information to their children. You have to be very careful, of course, when you're dealing particularly with teenagers. You know, obviously teenagers tend to be a rebellious group. They're looking for their independence. And one way of being independent is to, if the parent says yes, they say no. Whether they're wrong or right doesn't matter. What is important is that they have asserted their own independence. This starts really at the age of 2. You know, we talk about the terrible twos. And that's the same kind of a situation. But we're not worried about the 2-year-old. We're worried about the teenager. And so the parents, using the parents as a role model is very important. But then you have to get to the teenagers themselves and try to explain to them that that the problems, just like with smoking, the problem is not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen 2 years from now or 3 years from now. It's going to happen 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when they're in the middle of their major productive lives, and they have to come to understand that. So What can be done? Education is absolutely essential. Beyond that, obviously we have to try to limit the exposure to the EMRs, and we can do that many different ways. Using the cell phone only for emergencies, using it for very short conversations, not using it in your car because the signal that the cell phone has to put out in order to reach the towers when you're inside a car, a steel car, the strength of the signal is considerably higher, so that it's much more dangerous to be inside your car speaking on a phone than outside. The use of speaker phones, which gets the cell phone away from the person's head. The use of appropriate headsets, which also help to get the cell phone away from the head. And of course what we would like to refer to as intervention technologies, which